I've been working with startups and advisory with Acro Capital Investment Bank, advsr, and some other firms before that. So helping with raising money and helping with mergers and acquisitions, more on the mergers and acquisitions side for 15 years. And it's amazing there aren't very many people to talk to who have just had a relatively large sample size of startup acquisitions. There's people who've come sort of into advisory from other areas, and there's lawyers and so on, but folks who've actually sort of been in the midst and negotiated lots of deals, so and helped create opportunities, and also seen many fail. But Bambi, we were married. She said to me one day, you take so many phone calls, because I also have a friend who has a friend who wants to get some advice, who's in the middle of an opportunity, and she said, is there any, like a blog? Is there some way to make this more efficient? So I started writing, and I kept writing, and eventually I got about 150 pages in, and I said, there might be an actual book here. So created a book, and we launched it, and so far it's been pretty well received. As Aaron said, it's right now, I think, #1 and #2 on the mergers and acquisitions category for hot new releases. I think that also has something to do with the fact that M&A gets about a hot new release every 100 years. So it may be beneficial to be in a category, pick the right category, hit them where they ain't. I'm going to run through a quick summary of the book. You're welcome to pick up a copy. There's a few floating around, I think. There may probably be some later today, but I priced it really low. It's like $9.99 on Kindle, so it's basically free. So quick high-level thoughts. And this is just some excerpts that I thought would be helpful for startups to think about mergers and acquisitions and being acquired. And the first thing is that most companies are going to end up, most startups are going to end up, if they have a successful outcome, being acquired. What was the stat earlier this morning where the guy said that it's 6% get into Y Combinator, 2% even of those become worth 40 million? 40 million is not an IPO. 40 million is on a trajectory to be most likely, if it's a successful outcome, an acquisition. And the vast preponderance in some way, shape, or form will end up being acquired. So this book is to help demystify that process for startups specifically. So if we think about startups, there's three main forces that you think in terms of how you structure strategy. The first is startups build their products. They're usually very strong at product development. They then start to think about how do I reach customers in terms of distribution. And then they think, how do I make money in terms of monetization? And your typical emerging company is quite strong with their product strategy, is starting to get their arms around distribution, and is typically early on in their monetization, the formulation of their thinking around monetization. If you think then and posit 3 more dimensions, how do startups get the resources they need to grow? They can raise money, and that's usually the favorite. Go out, raise venture capital, put money into the company, and grow. As we saw in the panel previously with Motif, you can establish partnerships. He was able to get amazing distribution through the Wall Street bulge bracket banks. That's a great growth strategy because it means he has to spend less on customer acquisition, and he can now be able to reach customers in a more efficient way, requiring less capital, growing the business faster. And then really the ultimate partnership is to be acquired, where you can fully combine, fully leverage with no real friction the commercial reach of a larger player. So if you plot these 3, and this is all in the book, if you grab it, you'll get all this. No need to remember or take too many notes. The idea is that you have raising capital down one dimension. If you have a complete product suite, you have the ability to create independent channels. You have the ability to make money on your own. That makes a lot of sense to raise money. Go raise money. You should just be basically cranking out, spin the flywheel. Your customer lifetime value is going to exceed your cost of acquisition, and you should be out charging forward. If you can get logical integration points, and you can unlock opportunities and dependencies, and you can enhance your monetization with a partner, that's a great time to extend to partnerships, like we saw with Motif. And then if you really will be best leveraged in combination with a larger commercial platform where you really can take advantage of their distribution channels, maybe they can monetize what you're developing more effectively, then there's a good chance you're going to end up at some point being acquired. And that's really the third, if you will, leg of the growth strategy startup resource accumulation stool. So if we think about that, we take that approach, and we take that mindset, we see that something looks very similar to what we just saw. No, we see that the being acquired isn't really an exit, and that term has become so common, but it's a bit of a misnomer. Being acquired when you're still building a strategy is actually an entrance, and it should be approached as an entrance. You're still building out your product strategy. You're still building out your distribution. You're still building out your way of monetizing. It's not an exit. Very few people buy a startup and tell the people to go away and just basically take over the product. They want an ongoing game in progress that they can basically fill in and extend down a direction and move forward. So the first mindset thing is to think of, as you begin to think about acquisition, you begin to think about the next chapter of your business, being acquired is just one of a number of possible ways of accumulating the resources you need for growth, and it's much more about being an entrance than it is about being an exit. So, selling stuff. We're going to take a quick deviation. People think that you sell startups. If you look at this example, there's a lot going on in this picture economically. She's selling popsicles. She's got her friends there. If you see, there's a list of products. There's the peach, the banana. There's a price. All of them are $2.50. There's a tip jar. There's a number. She's positioned herself well it looks like a fun place. There's a great deal going on. This person is selling these popsicles, and this is an example of when it's a possible chance to actually sell an object. A house, a little bit more complicated, also something you can sell. Now in this case, there's a little bit more gamesmanship. When you're selling a house, if folks here have sold a house, you got to pick the price you list at. If you price low, you're trying to bring people in. You're going to try and run an auction and bid them up to get the best possible price. The transaction's a little bit more complicated, but ultimately, you're able to present the same offering to the market. You're able to provide guidance on pricing. If you get multiple interested parties, it's a little weird if someone is trying to sell you a popsicle to then run an immediate auction to figure out who else might be walking around that might pay a little bit more. But in a house, you can definitely run an auction, and that's how you get the price up, because there's marginal gain to be made by applying competitive dynamics. You can get the buyer increasingly committed to the transaction, particularly in a house. The buyer makes a deposit, so they place a deposit on the house. That commits them to the deal. So now you have, as the seller, you have leverage over the buyer because they don't want to lose their deposit by backing out. And you can quickly close a deal. You can close a popsicle deal like that. You can close a house deal within a month once escrow closes. And it's pretty structured how you do it. So you're able to present the same offering to everybody. You're able to provide price guidance. You're able to run an auction. You're able to get the buyer increasingly committed to the deal. And you're able to quickly close the deal. You can sell stuff when you can check all those boxes. If you think about startups, they have to be bought. They cannot be sold, at least for any interesting amount of money. And so let's take out the popsicle, let's take out the house, let's put in its place a magic box. And this is the title of the book, Magic Box Paradigm. If we think about a magic box, and we think of the magic box, when it gets opened, depending on who owns the box, inside is either gold coins. Open it, great, gold coins, awesome. Inside of it might be some silver coins, not quite as awesome, but something. Or it might be a lump of coal. So you don't know exactly what's going to be in the box when it's opened. And if we add two more dimensions to that, we say, on top of the fact we don't know exactly what's going to be in the box when it's opened, the only person who can open the box is the person currently selling you the box. So not only do I buy the box, I also kind of got to buy this gal or guy to go along with it to open it for me. And we have to get the box and that person with me to the top of a mountain before we're going to be able to open it. So we got to get to the top of a mountain. We have to have that person along in tow, and then we're going to open the box. We're going to see what it's worth. That is a lot more what it's like to buy a startup. You have to pay for the magic box, which is your startup. You have to retain the original owner. So don't just buy the thing. I actually got to buy the people to actually continue development of the technology. And I still have to integrate it into my other offerings and my distribution channels before I figure out what the thing's actually going to end up being worth. So I have to have a tremendous sense of that opportunity as the buyer. I have to have a tremendous amount of faith that there's actually going to be gold coins once I get to the top of the mountain. And I have to have a great deal of faith these people are going to stick around to help me get there. That is a very, very complicated transaction. So if we think about how tough a sell that is, you can't communicate a single price because it's worth different things to different people. Some person it's worth a gold coin, some people a silver coin, some people it's worth coal. Because of that, it's very hard to effectively run an auction. I can't play two people off each other because they're not even apples to oranges. They're apples to like refrigerators. They're just completely different in terms of what value they're going to see from that product or that startup. There is no leverage for the seller. In fact, unlike in buying a house where the seller gives a deposit to commit themselves, the buyer gives a deposit to commit themselves to the deal, no such dynamic exists when you're selling a startup. In fact, it's the reverse. You get typically locked up where you now cannot negotiate with other buyers in exclusive periods, but the buyer can change the deal, walk away from the deal, forget about the deal. They can do all kinds of different moves that maybe don't see a completed transaction at all. And the complexity of the deals is tremendous. These deals take a great deal of time to close. So by committing to any one buyer, you're taking a great deal of just deal risk in getting these things done. It's not like buying a popsicle where you hand them the money, they hand you the product. In buying a startup, it takes months sometimes to close a deal. So you can't sell stuff when you can't present the same offering to the market, when you can't provide guidance on pricing broadly, when you can't run an auction, when you can't get the buyer increasingly committed to the transaction, and you can't quickly close a deal. So those are the headwinds you're dealing with when you're dealing with startup acquisitions. It's a very, very different animal than buying any other kind of asset, almost any other asset in the world. So then but there's a good news to that. And we're going to get into a little bit how you mitigate some of those factors and how you actually make this reversed. And in fact, in many ways, some of the things that work against you in a traditional mindset of selling stuff can actually work in your favor if you approach startup acquisitions with the right mindset. So the whole point of the book is to help entrepreneurs, everybody here, get their brain around this problem and then actually rearrange the way they order and do things to give you guys a much higher chance of having a successful outcome if you choose to be acquired. Not saying you should be acquired. This isn't a book about selling your company. It's not like, it doesn't have lots of like arrows with targets and bullet points and things about must do this. It's very specifically, if you choose to be acquired, here's going to be the way to go about doing it if you want to follow that path. So why go down the path? Let's talk about valuation. How is valuation set? Valuation is derived from the utility of your startup to a particular buyer and framed by their view of your scarcity. I love that sentence. When I sat there, I wrote it, and I was like, this sentence is so sweet. It's so succinct. I nailed it on this sentence. But what does it really mean? Like, what the hell does that even mean? So let's break it down. So first, your value to them. On the, can someone just yell at them to be a little quieter? Thanks, Jen. And I just got yelled at, so I know how it feels. If you think about buyer A and buyer B, partner A, partner B, if a company has 1 billion customers and you can help them make another $1 in your startup off of those customers, then that's $1 billion opportunity. If a company buyer only has 10,000 customers and you can only help them make 50 cents, then it's whatever, a $5,000 opportunity, whatever it may be. So the place that value begins to be developed and how a startup's going to how a buyer's going to value you is going to be based on what you mean to them. Unlike the house that has an intrinsic value based on comps, based on recent other deals, those things don't matter when you're dealing with startups. What matters is what the buyer can use you for in their circumstance. And so you may just have tremendously different opportunities based on thank you, based on their need of you. The second piece of that is, okay, if you are in that big stack where you bring a tremendous amount of value and that you've convinced them that there's a great deal of value if they follow the path that you're on, well, how much of that are they going to give to you? So if they believe there's a tremendous amount of value, if they believe you are the magical, mystical golden hammer, and there's only one in the whole world, and there's nothing else like it, you are the only one, then you're going to be able to claim a great deal of that value in terms of how they're going to, what price they'll be willing to pay to acquire your company. If, however, there's a zillion ways to do it, even though you showed them that there's a great deal of value, they're going to say, well, thank you for showing me there's a great deal of value in this opportunity, but there's like a zillion ways to accomplish this problem or to take advantage of this opportunity. I'm not going to pay very much. So thanks for the insight. Do you want to be acquired? Here's a crappy offer. If not, I'm going to go down the street and I'm going to ask the next person who's going to be the company I'm going to buy. So if you can have the big stacks and you can have the golden hammer, you'll get to a good outcome. If you are going to have the small stack and very little scarcity, you're going to get to a not so great outcome. Then you can move these around and decide what combination fits. But the notion of your value to them framed in your perceived or actual scarcity is the ultimate driver of value in startup acquisitions. So magic box paradigm, I only have 3 more minutes. Buyer-driven rather than seller-driven. Approach acquisitions, think in reverse. Not what am I worth in myself? What did that company, oh, that company got acquired for 25 million bucks. I'm twice as far along as they are. I've got twice as many customers. I should be worth twice as much. Doesn't matter. Different magic box, different hands, different mountain. Doesn't matter to you. Maybe you can use it on the comp sheet later when you prove that you have a deal to be done. But you got to develop their understanding of how big that stack of money is and how rare your hammer is. Their entrances, not exits. And so be thinking not how am I going to sell this thing and walk away, but how do I get this buyer excited about this opportunity? And how do I get them to see the vision of where we can go together and where we can build together? They're, as we covered, they're dependent on valuation specific to each specific buyer-seller pairing. And they're very intricate and have to be designed and handled with care. These deals are I can't overestimate how complicated these deals are and how often they fall apart. I would basically, we work together, Aaron, Alex, and I, and I would basically say that once you get to terms, there's only about a 50% chance that an actual deal closes. So think about that. You've gotten them so excited, they've actually made an offer, you've actually come to economic terms. There's still only about a 50-50 shot that a deal actually ends up getting done. These deals fall apart like a bodily function. The big 3 takeaways, last 3 things. They're driven by a big idea. That has to be the buyer's idea. So if they're going to believe enough to acquire a company, they have to be the ones who have the idea. So the game is played in helping cultivate their thesis about why they want to acquire you. The complexity, as I mentioned before, has a great deal of implications across the whole process. There's more about this in the book. And these things just take time. I cannot tell you how often we get called by companies that have 90 days of cash left, even companies that have raised tens of millions, and say, oh, we just decided we want to get acquired. That's too late typically to cultivate an interesting opportunity. These things take, I would say, 12 to 24 months. So you have to be thinking a couple of years in advance, how am I developing relationships with strategic partners? Am I on their radar? Do they understand what I can do for them? Do they have a developing thesis? Do they appreciate our scarcity? Those things don't happen overnight, particularly if you're working on something really novel and new. They have to catch up to you. And now all of that takes much longer than people anticipate. It's not just, hey, let's go sell our company now because we can't raise any more money. It is, let's have a discussion and have opportunities present themselves while we're out cultivating other forms of resource accumulation. And maybe some partnerships come along, and there's lots of variance that can come out of those conversations. So if you think about what else is in the book, just to give you a quick summary, we cover strategy, we cover valuation, we cover building your narrative, how you tell your story, specifically to strategic partners, which is different than raising money and different than selling your product. We talk about establishing yourself as a thought leader. We'll talk about the process and actual approach to just executing on all of this. Talk about cultivating interest. We have a great deal about deal terms. And then we actually cover closing. So it's not a legal textbook. It's actually kind of a fun read, I would say, for this kind of stuff. And it's designed for you. It's designed for entrepreneurs. And it's designed to make it so you can get some coordinates. And look, you may not follow our approach or my approach exactly this way, but it's to get you thinking the right way and at least give you a feel for how this stuff comes along. Because I found many entrepreneurs don't have much of a feel, and worse, they're getting just terrible advice from people who approach this stuff like it's a house or like it's a popsicle. And you got to think about it like it's a magic box. Now, the good news is that this book isn't a startup. So it can be sold. And I'm here selling it. And so you got some fireworks there, your limited time offer, $9.99. It's been seen on Vator TV. So anyway, that's it. I hope this was helpful to you guys. It was really written for you. No one's gonna make any money on this book. So the hope is that you guys can take advantage of it and give you kind of a framework for thinking about acquisitions. That's it. Yeah.